One. Welcome back, Beans Army, to another episode of the Less is More Sports podcast, the college offseason podcast, where you could say we're less of the regular season, but more of the offseason. And before we start the show, I know Matt still is not growing on Matt, that intro, but that's okay. We're going to go with it. Before we start the show, I have a couple things I want to get off my chest real quick. First and foremost, and most importantly, I want to shout out longtime friend of the show and my good friend DJ Miller for getting married a couple weeks ago. I was honored to be in the wedding, and that's a big reason why we haven't done a show in so long, because I was in Florida enjoying my time, seeing one of my best friends get married. It's a beautiful time. The second thing I want to bring up is that going from something good to something that really pisses me off. Apparently, Cameron Boozer and Cooper Flagg's AAU game was televised today, and I completely slept through it. As you all on the Facebook page already know, that like my Facebook page is slowly becoming like the Cooper Flagg fan page. So any chance I get to watch those two play would be like a treat in general, but I completely missed it because, I had to get my pre-podcast nap in, because rituals and stuff. And the third thing I want to talk about is this is completely irrelevant to the sports scene altogether and the podcast scene altogether. But I've never been I never thought I would ever wear Crocs, but I found on Google, they got Godzilla Crocs. So I'm going to have to buy some Crocs. I just might have to make the jump, dude.
Oh my God. We were talking about congratulations, DJ. Yeah, that makes sense. Friend of the show. Okay, I understand why Les says that. He's been on this recruiting trail forever, and then we just jumped to Godzilla Crocs.
Godzilla Crocs, hey, they're lit though. It's from the poster of the 2014 Godzilla movie. Those are the ones I'm about to cop. That's hard as hell, dude.
Oh my gosh.
As y'all know, as much as I am a sports nerd, hey, I'm a big time Godzilla nerd too. That's the king of the monsters, dude.
Well, I know that. It's just now will Crocs sponsor the podcast?
That would be lit, Crocs, I mean, at this point, I'd be cool with any sponsors, low key. But if Crocs want to sponsor the podcast, or if Toho or Legendary want to sponsor the podcast just because we name dropped Godzilla, that'd be amazing too.
We just find a way to work every character to our. Today we're talking about the Gigan of defensive coordinators, underrated monster.
No, we already have, because a while back you referred to one thing as the three-headed monster, the King Ghidorah, if you will. So you already did.
I did do that, yes, and we didn't get sued, so that's a good sign.
That's not really anything to sue over. I mean, we just name drop King Ghidorah. We're allowed to do that.
I don't know. Tohei can be pretty protective of their IPs, so.
I mean, well, the 1998 Godzilla film would disagree.
Yeah. It had a
but
cool
then they got their revenge. They got their revenge in Final Wars.
They did. They really freaking did. Final Wars is it's anytime you get three or more Godzilla monsters together, it's going to be a good movie, just regardless.
Oh, for
because
sure.
There's going to be carnage. There's going to be something awesome happens. It doesn't matter if you got Rodan, Mothra, and Godzilla. You could have Anguirus and the crab monster from Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster, or the giant spider Kumonga. Anytime you get three or more monsters together, we're gonna have a. You didn't know I knew that, did you, Les? You're surprised.
I'm really impressed. I'm so proud of you right now.
Caesar, Jet Jaguar, you name it.
I love you so much right now.
Oh my gosh, Jet Jaguar was my favorite growing up. I just love the idea of a weird-looking mecha suit.
Jet Jaguar wasn't even the coolest character in the movie.
You're right about that, but Jet Jaguar's still cool.
We're going to talk about the badass beetle. Come on now.
Okay, that's true too. I did like Gigan though. Gigan really is one of my favorites. I just love his little space chicken with scythe arms thing. It's really cool.
Gigan is a crowd favorite with Godzilla. My personal favorite villain is Destroya.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, Destroya's pretty good. Biolante's pretty good too.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. Are we going to become a Godzilla podcast?
We might as well. I mean, but anyways, if I didn't like sports too much, I feel like we could go full board Godzilla podcast and that'd be fine.
It would be interesting.
We could do our own separate podcast and do Godzilla versus every week. That would be lit.
Who would win in a fight between Godzilla and, surprisingly not Tohei Studios' own, Gamera, the turtle?
That's the most classic question in the MonsterVerse. Who would win? Yeah. And even though we all know it would be Godzilla, but
Yeah, but Gamera has the children on his side.
Does he?
Yes, the children love Gamera.
When I was a child, I didn't love Gamera at all. I thought Gamera was
The
stupid.
children in the movies love Gamera less. The children in the movies love Gamera.
They're not even real. It doesn't matter.
You mean to
They're
tell me
not
that?
real kids.
Yes, they are. Well, I mean, they're actors. They're real actors.
But the characters don't exist in real life. You
How do
know
you
they're
know?
paid good. They're paid good money to pretend like they like Gamera.
How do you know that Gamera isn't based on a true story?
Well, let's see. How many prehistoric giant turtles have there been roaming the earth
One
in
at
our
least.
lifetime? In our lifetime. Okay, I better
One
rephrase that.
at
In
least.
our lifetime.
One at least. The Beast of Buzzco up in Indiana. Oscar,
Okay.
the giant turtle.
I really forgot I said that to the wrong person.
You opened the can of worms, young man. Now you've got to pay me. Even though that happened in the 1920s. Our grandparents might remember it. But yeah, the Beast of Busco, Oscar, Churubusco, Indiana, near Fort Wayne. You can still see the net they used to try to catch the giant turtle in a cafe there. It's really cool. Highly recommend it.
Which shout out to Fort Wayne, because there's going to be a couple listeners that know why, but you know.
Tin Caps. We love the Fort Wayne Tin Caps.
And they got one of the nicest fields in minor league baseball. Probably maybe the nicest field in minor league baseball.
Did you know that Johnny Appleseed is like buried allegedly like 2 miles from there?
Yes, I actually did know that.
Really cool. That's really cool.
Like I said, shout out to Fort Wayne for reasons undisclosed. Y'all know who I'm talking about.
Okay, so Gamera, minor league baseball, Indiana cryptozoology. That's what we're talking about today. Goodbye, everybody.
All right, goodbye. Anyways, we actually have a show to do. Like as always, we are the College Offseason Podcast, and based on former episodes of the show, we've talked about recruits, we've talked about head coaching changes, we've talked about the transfer portal, but we have yet to include the top coordinator hires in college football. So today's episode, Matt and I are going to give our top 5 coordinator hires across the college football landscape. And Matt, since I dominated the intro, I want you to give your top 5 first. So let's go. What do you mean, uh-oh?
I misunderstood the question. I picked my top 5 favorite coordinators. I still did coordinators, but I didn't do who got hired. I just did who's a good coordinator that I think is flying under the radar.
Well, for the first time on the show, we're going to flip the script. Matt is going to give his top 5 coordinators in college football, and I'm going to give my top 5 coordinator hires. So you know what? It was a mistake, but it worked out great. So here we go.
Perfect. So do you want me to go first?
Yes, sir. You're still going first. I dominated the intro.
All right. Well, I'm going to start by giving a special shout out to Ryan Gaddis, the offensive coordinator in Maryland. Big prospect when he left Michigan. Still pretty darn cool. I really like him as an honorable mention here, but we're going to get right into the top 5 as I pull up my notes and prepare to talk about stuff. A dude who we don't talk about a lot, in spite of because his head coaching tenure was so rife with like controversy and needling and whatnot. But a dude who is the defensive coordinator at Georgia. I did not know this until I looked it up. Will Muschamp wasn't a great coach at Florida or South Carolina, but he was Nick Saban's right hand at LSU. He was a member. He was a hook 'em horn. You know how that goes. We talk all the time about the Georgia defense, and we don't give like this dude any credit for just how good they are. And people will be like, Matt, it's because they're so talented. And I'm like, yes. But part of being a good coach is knowing how to manage that talent, manage those egos, and get those guys playing at the high level we've seen Georgia play at this entire season. 10th in FBS total defense last year, 15 touchdown throws in 15 games. He's a very good defensive coordinator, and I feel like because his head coaching tenures were a little bit, let's just be honest, mediocre at best, bad at worst, that we don't talk about that guy enough. So number 5, co-defensive coordinator of the Georgia Bulldogs, Mr. Will Muschamp.
Before you move on, I do want to add one thing. And because I absolutely loved when Matt said, well, Matt, they got so many talented players. And I love that point you made, because that is one of the biggest knocks on, or the biggest, what's the word I'm looking for? Where one of the biggest things people discredit when it comes to a coach is like, oh, well, he had talented players. I want you to name me a successful coach who didn't have talented players. Thank you very much. Exactly.
I'm just going
Proceed,
to.
friend.
I'm sipping like Kermit the Frog right now.
That's none of my business. I actually got tea on me. As y'all know, I got the hibiscus tea.
Got-
That's who we could be. That's who we could be sponsored by.
Do not spill the tea, Les. Do not spill the tea. At number 4, though, I've got another team that kind of flies under the radar, but over the past couple seasons and I know they've lost their quarterback and everything. He's at Notre Dame now. But their offense has just been one of the most explosive, high octane, interesting offenses I've seen. And I'm going to give my number 4 nod to Warren Ruggiero of the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. He's been there since 2014. They've been one of the top passing teams in the ACC period. They averaged 32.8 points per game in 2020, 41 in 2021, and 36.1 in 2022. These guys are good. Sam Hartman isn't there anymore. I know that's going to be a detractor, but anytime you have an offense like that, I can't remember the exact numbers and I should have written it down. But Wake Forest leads the nation, the entire nation, for a team you don't think about, in yards before the catch. That's pretty darn cool. When like these receivers are getting open enough in a conference like the ACC, which has been down kind of recently. But still, it's a Power 5 conference. And you've got guys who are just zooming it down the field, getting open, getting the ball, scoring 40 points per game in conference play. In any conference is hard because those guys know you. They know what makes you tick. They know how to stop you. But scoring 30, 40 points a game and just having the most yards after catch in terms of having the most yards before catch, in terms of an offense in the modern era even is very impressive. So I'm going to give my number 4 nod to Warren Ruggiero of Wake Forest, a team a lot of people don't think about, but is very, very explosive, and that man deserves all the credit in the world for it.
Solid pick.
Moving into number 3, a recurring joke on this podcast that really doesn't need to be a joke. Les, Iowa. And the reason why we make fun of Iowa is because of this man right here, my number 3 pick, Phil Parker. He has been there since 2012. He's 60 freaking years old, which is a lifetime in college football. And the one thing we always talk about when we talk about Iowa, and I know we all talk about Kurt Ferenc and how like pedestrian his offenses are and how tough as nails he is. But Phil Parker is the guy who I think saves Iowa year in and year out, for lack of a better term. Because all we talk about with that Iowa, even in the Music City Bowl against Kentucky, what do we talk about? That Iowa defense. That Iowa defense is always good. In Phil Parker's time at Iowa, since 2012, 17 guys have entered the league from an Iowa defensive standpoint. That's pretty good. He's had a Butkus Award winner last year. He's had Lucas Van Ness. He's had many, many AP All-Americans. And we know that Iowa defense is the engine that makes that team go. They generate the turnovers. They get the sacks. They make sure that Iowa beats North Dakota State 9-6 because that's just how tough they are. And that's what Phil Parker does for the Iowa Hawkeyes. And that's why he's my number 3 overall coordinator pick for guys who fly under the radar that we really need to focus on talking about. Iowa deserves a little bit of credit as a treat. Coming in at number 2, a guy who I think is going to end up being a head coach fairly soon, and that's Kurt Maddox, a name you may not hear a lot, but this team's been in the news lately, and that's the San Diego State Aztecs defensive coordinator. Now, for those of you who aren't following, San Diego State wanted out of the Mountain West. Looked like they were going to join the Pac-12. Pac-12 said no. They were trying to go back. And now it looks like they're not going to have a conference home for a while. He came from the FCS, but still, San Diego State ranked first in their conference in total defense the past 3 years. They have a scheme that's a bend but don't break. They keep guys out of the end zone, which is why it's very important. Why it's very important. He's a great linebackers coach. They really haven't. They dominate against the run, which is huge. Because, if you dominate, especially in a smaller conference like that, dominating against the run makes all the world difference. And they've been top 3 nationally ranked for 3 years. And I'm not going to lie and act like San Diego State is a football powerhouse, Les. They've had some good players in the past. They've had some good teams. But I'm not going to act like they're like the greatest team of all time. because they're not. I mean, they're not. San Diego State is not a history program by any stretch of the imagination. But the way they've been improving on defense has been really good, and that's because of Kurt Maddox. I wouldn't be surprised, even though he's a defensive guy, if he's got a job very soon, coaching his own team. That's why he's my number 2 pick. But as for my number 1, we're going to stay on the West Coast here. A guy who I think is going to have, and we'll talk about this team a lot when it's time to cap and no cap as we approach the season. Ryan Grubb. A guy you may not have heard of yet, but you're going to hear about him this year for sure. The offensive coordinator for the Washington Huskies. Ooh, he came only a couple years ago, but man, Washington's offense has taken the Pac-12 in a complete frenzy. These guys are insane. They lead the entire FBS in passing offense last year. He's got an amazing quarterback, a guy we love to death, in Michael Penix Jr. He's staying around. Last year, threw for over 4,600 yards. That's pretty good. They've had a 1,000 yards receiver. They've got a mobile quarterback. He's with Kellen DeBoer, another guy we absolutely love. Ryan Grubb is going to have a breakout candidate. Is going to be a breakout candidate for your school's job next year if you have a bad year, because that Washington offense is just so RPO, air raid based. It's going to be absolutely bonkers to watch Michael Penix Jr. in year 2 with that. So I'm going to give my number 1 slot to the offensive coordinator of the Washington Huskies, Ryan Grubb. He came from Fresno State to Washington, and he's reinventing the West Coast offense in college football, and I think that's a beautiful thing. So, Les, those are my top 5 coordinators who kind of fly under the radar, who are very important, but they're not the only coordinators. Some guys do move up in the world or have a change of scene, and that's who you're covering. So, let's hear your top 5 hires, I suppose is what they are. New hires in terms of coordinating how they'll impact the upcoming season.
So because I thought Matt was going to give his top 5 coordinator hires, I assumed that he was going to include these 2. So I'm going to start off with 2 honorable mentions. We're going to talk about the new offensive coordinator for Alabama, Tommy Rees. A very good offensive coordinator, has been at Notre Dame the last several years, former Notre Dame quarterback. He's got his work cut out for this year because we really don't know the quarterback situation as of right now for the Alabama Crimson Tide, but still great offensive coordinator nonetheless. And the number 2 honorable mention is a guy that we've talked about a lot on the show, and big reason because it is a fairly local team, and that is Liam Cohen returning to the Kentucky Wildcats from the LA Rams. I almost called them the St. Louis Rams. That was about to be a big debacle. Ugh.
Yeah,
little dated with that one.
We would get a lot of angry emails from people at the Edward Jones Dome.
Anyways, so kicking off my number 5 is the new defensive coordinator for Nebraska, and that is Tony White. And let me tell you, this is the most slept-on move on my list because he must have been doing something right because he was the first coordinator hire in the Matt Rule era. He's known for running a 3-3-5 defense, and if you're not familiar with that, it's the same style that TCU ran last year. And one of his biggest contributions, and the thing that's the most appealing about him, is that before he got to Syracuse, Syracuse was the 100 ranked defense in college football. In his last 2 seasons there, they've been a top 50 defense. I'd say that's a pretty good improvement.
Pretty good.
Anyways, doing a little speed round because, we took a lot of time on that intro. Number 4, I'm going to have Pete Golding, the new defensive coordinator at Ole Miss. And I'm going to tell you one thing. Lane Kiffin must have given him an offer he absolutely could not refuse because Golding is the first ever Saban coordinator to leave only to take another coordinator position within the SEC. And how good was Pete Golding, Matt? In his 5 seasons at Alabama, Golding had a top 10 defense 4 times. 2022 being the outlier with the 12th ranked defense in college football. So still right there. In 2022, Ole Miss, they had the 63rd ranked scoring defense in college football. So this is definitely an area of need. And we all know Ole Miss is talented, so Golding's going to have players to work with. One thing I really hope they do, though, is if Golding comes in year 1 and works his magic, they got to bring back the land shark. The land shark.
That's a must, or he deserves to be fired.
Absolutely. So anyways, my number 4 for time constraints is Pete Golding. Moving on to number 3, and this is a name that college football fans are all too familiar with. and that is Garrett Riley, the new offensive coordinator at Clemson. And let's be honest, if your last name's Riley and you can't coach offense, you just need to be disowned at that point. In
Change
his
your name to
lone
Ben.
right in his lone season at TCU as the TCU offensive coordinator, Riley led the Frogs to the 9th-ranked offense in college football, scoring 38.8 points a game, helping not only TCU reach the national championship game, but for Max Duggan to have a Heisman finalist season. And here's why Clemson needs him. Ever since Trevor Lawrence, aka my son, left for the NFL, offense has been a struggle for the Tigers. The once highly touted quarterback prospect DJ Uyangale has now transferred to Oregon State. But with another highly touted quarterback prospect and Cade Klubnik taking over as the starter, Riley will have the talent to work with, and we can see if he can revive the sinking Clemson ship. But anyways, little point that's a little off topic. Well, not really off topic, but, little side point. In my opinion, Clemson has not had a good offensive coordinator since Chad Morris, and that was back when Taj Boyd was on the roster. If Riley works out, that'll be a huge addition.
And having Will Shipley is always a plus.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's like the Christian McCaffrey of college football right now.
Christian McCaffrey of college football. Who was Christian McCaffrey of college football when Christian McCaffrey was in college?
It was Christian McCaffrey. I mean, let's be honest. And Christian McCaffrey should have won the Heisman if we're being honest. He broke Barry Sanders' single season all-purpose yardage record. Enough said. I don't care how many touchdowns Derrick Henry had more than him. It should have been McCaffrey.
I just thought of Toby Gerhart for the first time in a long time. I hope he's well.
Yes, we hope he's well because we don't wish anybody bad on this podcast. We are a positive podcast. Which might be why some people don't want to listen. I don't know. People are negative.
People are
negative.
Do you have any negative? Do you have any negative things to say about your number 2 pick?
Not at all, because it's low key my only homer pick on this list. So, number 2, we have special assistant to the head coach for my Texas Longhorns, Paul Chryst. And despite an 8-5 record in 2022, Texas took a big jump from year 1 of the Sark era. Special assistant to the head coach, Gary Patterson, received a lot of credit for those improvements. But with him stepping down after last season, that left big shoes to fill for the Horns. In comes former college football head coach Paul Chryst. In his 11 seasons as a college football head coach, he won 65% of his games. In his 8 seasons at Wisconsin, he won 72% of them. And he went 6-1 in bowl games. Makes you really wonder why he was fired, but that's neither here nor there. Having a former head coach with a ton of success in Sark's corner is always a bonus. But the most intriguing side of this hire is Chryst's reputation for player development. During his tenure at Wisconsin, he coached 18 All-Americans and produced over 30 NFL draft picks. That will not only be vital for getting the most out of an already talented Texas roster, but keeping Texas as an intriguing landing spot for talented players to come in. So yeah, not really much negativity there, though.
Every time you mention like assistant to the blank, I just think of that dude with the glasses from The Office. That dude.
Are you talking about Dwight?
Yeah, that's his name.
Dwight Schrute from Schrute Farms.
Tell
me why somebody said I used to look like Dwight Schrute.
You never looked like Dwight Schrute. You look like Little Dicky in college because you got a little bit of poofage.
I never looked like Little Dicky either.
You did. You never looked like Dwight Schrute, though.
I guess I've heard so many names of people that like they say I look like that I just don't see. I've heard, the ones I don't see, Dwight Schrute, Lil Dicky, and Jimmy Neutron. God a blast.
Jimmy Neutron.
I think that's just because I have a big head.
What were you doing to your hair, Les? You got some questions to answer here.
I can't even grow my hair. What are we talking about?
Does that mean I'm Carl? Do I have to start talking about llamas? Llama.
Hey, low-key, I can see you just going on a llama rant, low-key, halfway through the podcast. Llama.
Ultra Lord halfway through the
That's podcast. Sheen. That's Duncan Robinson. Let's get our facts straight.
Jimmy Neutron. That one genuinely shocks me. Maybe you were wearing glasses or something when somebody called you Dwight Schrute, but on what planet Does any regular human being look like James Isaac Neutron?
I see what you did there because it's a science cartoon and says on what planet. I appreciate the unofficial pun there.
I think I can still sing the theme song to that. I'm not gonna do it and subject people's ears to it. But I love that show. So I oh my gosh.
I think as long as we are all in agreement that Sheen and Goddard are the two best characters on that show, I think we're good.
That means Beans Goddard. Beans a
Speaking of
robot.
which,
Beans a robot.
he's so unintrigued right now.
He's so unintrigued right now. All right.
He's been chilling this whole time.
He has been. He's been a good boy. Now, Les, I know what your number one is, but before we hit your number one, who are your top four again? Since we've been talking about Jimmy Neutron.
So because we got distracted by my somehow looking like Jimmy Neutron. If you haven't been following along, my number 5 was Tony White, the new defensive coordinator for Nebraska. My number 4 was Pete Golding, the new defensive coordinator from Ole Miss. Number 3 is the new offense coordinator for Clemson, Garrett Riley. And my number 2 is the new special assistant to the head coach for my Texas Longhorns, Paul Chryst.
And now for the number 1 overall pick, Les will take.
And then with the number 1 overall pick in the college football coordinator draft, Les Abbott takes the new offensive coordinator for the Wisconsin Badgers, Phil Longo. And going from someone who used to coach at Wisconsin with my number 2 pick to someone who is currently at Wisconsin and Phil Longo. And that is a name that college football heads are all too familiar with because he's been coaching in the college football scene for the last 33 years. And with one common denominator, Matt, his offenses always put up 30 points a game. Luke Fickell was hired as the new head coach of the Badgers. And as much success as he had in Cincinnati, defense was his calling card. That's what made those teams so good. Not to discredit Desmond Ridder, shout out to my St. X grad, but defense was Luke Fickell's calling card and his strong suit. They needed a really good offensive coordinator to come in and bring in the little Thanos balance theme to have on both sides of the ball. And for those, to catch those up to speed, Longo spent his last 4 seasons at North Carolina working with the likes of Sam Howell and Drake May, who you could argue were some of the best quarterbacks in college football during that time. Drake May being who many believe is a future top 10 pick and the current top 2 or 3 quarterback in college football. No one should be more excited about this move than Wisconsin transfer quarterback Tanner Mordecai, who was at his previous school at SMU. He absolutely lit it up through the air. He passed for over 3,500 yards and 33 touchdowns in each of the last 2 seasons. However, switching from the American Conference to the Big Ten can be an adjustment. But with an offensive guru like Longo in his corner, the transition can be much smoother.
Amen to that.
So just a little recap. My number 5 was Tony White. Number 4 was Pete Golding. Number 3 was Garrett Riley. Number 2 was Paul Chryst. And number 1 was Phil Longo. And that concludes my list.
And my returning list, for those keeping track at home, was at number 5, Will Muschamp. At number 4, Warren Ruggiero. At number 3, Phil Parker. At number 2, Ken Maddox. And at number 1, Ryan Grubb. So that concludes our discussion about coordinators.
I'm going to be completely honest. I literally left out Tommy Rees and Liam Cohen because I thought you were going to talk about him as much as you've talked about him on this podcast previously.
Yeah, but you can't. You need to learn that I'm not going to do what you expect out of me.
That's true. I mean, you kind of keep me on my toes. That's kind of why you're a great podcast host.
I'll have to make Les stay energetic. We could spend the rest of our time talking about Jimmy Neutron now.
I mean, we could. I mean, between as we approach 10 minutes left to go, I'll say we could talk about Jimmy Neutron, but between Matt and Dean, I mean, I'm pretty much keeping on my toes. They're on the show because I don't know what he's going to do.
We try our best to keep Les, what's the word I'm looking for? Honest and poised.
I don't know how much of either one I am, but hey, we'll go with it.
Well, I gave you a chance to praise yourself, and you just go, yeah, I'm not either one of those things. And it's like, great.
Well, maybe I just have to keep you on your toes. Maybe I have to return the favor.
Well, maybe. I like to think that I'm always kind of on my toes in some ways. I have to be quick with the clapbacks.
I mean, you are pretty witty. I'll give you that. And I should have expected that you were going to give 5 names that absolutely no one is talking about, because
That's what
that's like the only way Matt knows how to be.
That's the only. I like to keep people guessing. I started doing that immaculate grid thing where like you guess the 9 baseball players, and I'm like going for that rarity score, man. I'm going with Al Oliver. I'm going with Felipe Alou, Bobby Bonds. I'm going with guys who played in the 70s and 80s who made like one All-Star game. Just see how close I get to having like a perfect rarity score on that.
My buddy sent me the NFL version of it, and I literally couldn't even get the first square. Like I tried for all of about like a
Okay,
couple
what
minutes,
was?
and like I
Do
just
you
gave up.
remember what it was? Let's see if we can do like the
No,
first. Okay, darn.
no, I don't remember what it was. No, like I literally got mad and just like got out of it.
Baseball is the only grid I can do because I can't be consumed by the grids. But
Even
I
though I feel
can't.
like you already are.
Getting into hurdle was bad enough because then I did 60s hurdle and Beatles hurdle, and I was trying to get stuff within like 2 seconds, and I usually could.
But anyways, yeah, I mean that wraps up our coordinator segment of the podcast, and I'm actually low key excited because we've been on a couple hiatuses the last couple weeks or last couple months really, and just getting back in the swing of things has been really fun for me because before you know it, we're gonna have to do our cap or no cap episode for college football, and Matt and I always have a good time with that. I mean
Caps
that's
are
gonna be
all.
so. Oh, for sure, it's
That
gonna
may
in
have
this.
to be a two-parter.
Do what?
That may have to be a two-parter.
It may. I don't know. I mean, obviously I'm going to be talking with you outside of the show, and we're going to be talking about narratives and stuff, but I mean with all like the moving pieces in college football this past year, there's so many narratives that we could talk about. I mean, between Deion Sanders going to Colorado, or the narrative that Caleb Williams could repeat as the Heisman Trophy winner, and all, of course, the moving pieces that we talk about every show.
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
there's just going to be so much. And of course, you obviously this is not going to be any surprise. This is not going to be a surprise to anyone who listens to the show. But that the question, is Texas back, is going to be asked.
Les will say no. Les will say yes, and I may, say no just to make Les squirm a little bit. It'll be fun.
I am going to squirm a little bit.
It'll be fun. I'm gonna make him think Oklahoma will win the conference, just to put that seed of doubt in his mind.
Then I know you capping.
Okay. What if I said Kansas is coming for you?
I would believe Kansas before Oklahoma, for being honest.
Jalen Daniels, man. I'm expecting a big breakout year from Jalen Daniels.
And if he can't go, don't forget about the best backup in college football, Jason Bean.
Bean doesn't have any thoughts about that. He's just like, why is the camera back on me?
I mean, he's trying to avoid the camera today. Like, he's a little camera shy today. He never is camera shy.
He forgot what it's like to take that breath of stardom.
I mean, he forgets that, like, he is the cult icon on the show.
Yeah, nobody cares about us. If this was just 40 minutes of Bean looking at the camera, it would probably be our highest rated episode.
Just have you ever seen that Snapchat I sent of like Bean mixed in with the Kardashians?
Yes. we need to do that. Bean, but it's just like he's on the sidelines with Texas football. We now go live to our field reporter, Bean.
Bean just looks at Sark and goes, kind of gives him that look like you know what to say. And then Sark keeps talking to him, and Bean just gives him the side eye like.
Bean's gonna track down Arch Manning. Give him the face.
And then we're probably gonna have to run polls. Who's more famous, Bean or Arch Manning?
Bean gets an NIL.
Dude, I mean, how shitty would that be if I just started profiting off my dog? But I guess people do it on social media. I mean, there's Doug the Pug. I mean, I think Bean is way cuter than Doug.
That's a good question. Put that on the poll. Who's cuter, Bean or Doug the Pug?
That's gonna be the new poll.
That is going to be the new poll. We're going to have to figure out the answer to this question.
That might be how we end the show. So, yeah, guys, we're going to vote in this poll after the show. Who is cuter, Bean or Doug the Pug?
We got to add in another option because we got to maintain our college cred. Bean, Doug the Pug, or Uga.
I knew you were going to say Uga. I knew we were going to say Uga.
Well, Butler doesn't have a football team. Otherwise, I was going to go with Butler Blue, but they don't have a football team that plays Division I.
Which is absolutely lame. Cornballs.
I mean, I've been to Butler's campus. I don't know how they could fit a bigger stadium on there.
They're still cornballs. I mean,
I
Duke
almost
has
played
a really
for them,
nice.
though.
I mean, okay, but you didn't. You went to
No.
a nice little community college in New Albany, Indiana, with me.
Yeah.
That also didn't have a football team.
No, I was about to say, did we have a football team last? Did we?
No, we're a community college. That's different. We're not Division I.
That's true. Now, part of the reason I didn't go to Butler is because even though I got scholarships, it was just too damn expensive. And their
Yeah.
dorms didn't even have air conditioning. They were like, it'll be warm your first couple weeks here, but it'll get cool once it hits October. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about?
I mean, that's gonna be 2 weeks too long.
I've lived in Indiana my entire life, and we've had 90-degree days in the middle of October. I know that. And don't even get me started on September. It's like, you are selling me a crock of lies, Butler University.
So Butler University, you could be getting the next Matt McClellan if you just put air conditioning in your damn dorms. That's what I'm hearing.
That's more of a reason to not do that, Les. Not to put air conditioning.
I was trying to compliment you, and you turned it down.
Imagine me running around Indianapolis. Whee! It would be like the pig from that Geico commercials. Matthew.
Wow. Wow. You are trashing yourself right now. That is wild. And now you have the Emperor's attention.
Bean likes that Geico commercial. That's his favorite one.
He's probably like, look at that pig.
Well, I am a pig.
Wow. Bean probably looks at the Geico pig and just wants bacon out of it. Oh, yeah, you heard bacon. Now you want to look at me.
He get it himself, but he doesn't have thumbs. Oh, sorry. That's a bacon strips reference.
Bean is very crafty. Let me tell you, before we end the show, I'm going to tell you a quick story. So I got my carpets cleaned a while ago, and I was at work. So my grandma, came over to, watch Bean while they cleaned my carpets. And because I didn't want anything touching my carpets for the next couple hours, Grandma put Bean in the kitchen, and she built like this absolute fortress of a barrier with all this furniture. So I get a text while I'm at work, and she says, "There's no way Bean got out of it." I get home, I look into my kitchen, and Bean is nowhere to be found. So I'm just looking around, I'm like, Bean? All of a sudden I hear something jump off my bed, and here comes Bean. And I'm like, I'm looking at like the little barrier, and I'm looking at him like, how the hell did you get out of that? Yeah. I'm like, you do got hops. Did you just jump over it? So like I've searched around the barrier to see if I could find anything at all. And I found this one little bitty hole that he could fit through.
Whoa, good job, Bean.
He is crafty. Like he's like MacGyver in dog form.
He's McDogver.
McDover. He's McDover.
McCurver. I don't know. Anyway, folks, don't forget to vote in our poll. Figure out who the cutest famous dog is: Doug the Pug, Bean, or Ugga.
That's right. And as always, like and subscribe to the Less is More Sports YouTube and Spotify channel. Follow our social media pages on Facebook and Twitter, and the new the new Instagram threads. Shout out to Zuck for that one.
Oh gosh. Shout out to the Zuck. We
shout out to the Zuck. As always, we hope you enjoyed this podcast. And until next time, Matt and I are out.
Got a blast.
Ultra Lord. Llama, llama, llama.